The ancient world is filled with countless mysteries that remain unsolved. From the legendary elf stones of Iceland, to the traces of horned giants in Pennsylvania, and even ancient carvings depicting alien-like beings in Nevada. Could the strange things found in old legends have once truly existed in human history? Let's explore each of these stories in today's video. So fasten your seatbelt as we dive into today's mystery. But first, you'll have incredible luck if you like, and subscribe before this video ends. The Giant Samurai. There is a legend that giant samurai warriors once roamed these lands more than 1,000 years ago. But these warriors are not just characters in Japanese mythology. Archaeologists have uncovered weapons of astonishing power that may have once belonged to truly gigantic samurai. What you are about to see will challenge every reasonable explanation. A remarkable archaeological discovery has recently appeared across various social media platforms. You may have already seen it. The remains of a legendary figure, known only as the Giant Samurai, were found in a remote region of Japan. Archaeologists searching for ancient relics stumbled upon a burial site unlike any they had seen before. This grave was as small as a mouse hole. Japanese researchers are believed to have unearthed the skeleton of an actual giant, standing more than 15 feet tall. The image of a 15-foot warrior clad in armor as large as an elephant might sound like something out of a video game, but there are in fact historical artifacts that suggest the existence of samurai of truly unusual size. One such artifact is the Norimitsu Odachi. This is not a mythical weapon, but a real historical object preserved at Kibitsu Shrine in Okayama Prefecture. The sword was forged in the 15th century, measuring an astounding 12 feet in length and weighing 32 pounds. To put that into perspective, it is longer than a standard door and heavier than a bowling ball. And it is so massive that it takes 4 or 5 people just to move it. Anyone who could wield a 12-foot sword in combat must have possessed the blood of the gods. Hercules was a demigod, so perhaps only he could have handled the Norimitsu Odachi. Even an exceptionally strong ordinary samurai would have struggled to use such a weapon effectively in battle. The sheer size and weight of the Norimitsu Odachi suggests that whoever used it must have possessed physical abilities beyond imagination. According to ancient Japanese legend, the swordsmith Amakuni Yasutsuna designed the first curved, single-edged sword, known as the taki, around 1,500 years ago. The Norimitsu Odachi is indeed a tachi sword, but one that is far larger than usual. Yet, its true origin remains a mystery. The truth about this colossal sword is still unknown, and no one even knows how it came to be at Kibitsu Shrine. Some scholars believe it was used for religious ceremonies, while others suggest that it really was wielded by a 15-foot-tall samurai warrior. But the surprising thing is, Norimitsu Odachi is not the only giant sword. In 2023, Japanese archaeologists uncovered yet another massive blade at a burial mound near the ancient city of Nara, dating back roughly 1,600 years. This Nara sword was not as large as the Norimitsu Odachi, measuring only 7.5 feet in length. Archaeologists explained that this giant sword was buried with someone to protect them from evil in the afterlife. But I want to hear your opinion. With swords like these, and the giant suits of armor believed to have once existed, it seems that there may be much more to ancient legends than just fairy tales. What is the truth? Cannibalism. For more than a century, the mysterious remains of a young child have left scientists searching for answers. What troubles them is not only the discovery of these bones, but more specifically the strange cut marks found on them. The jawbone belonged to a boy who was only about 5 years old when he died. When experts examined it, they noticed unusual cuts and indentations. This led to the hypothesis that the child may have been the victim of cannibalism or some strange prehistoric ritual. These remains were found in El Castillo Cave, part of a famous cave system in Spain. This area is well known for providing the earliest evidence of human presence in Europe, as well as for its prehistoric cave paintings that have fascinated archaeologists for years. In 1912, German paleontologist Hugo Obermeier and his colleagues discovered the child's jawbone. However, their research was interrupted by the outbreak of World War I, and the bones were stored away in a museum, almost forgotten. It was only much later that another research team retraced their steps and managed to recover these remains. When scientists studied the jawbone more closely, they made a chilling discovery. There were deep, sharp cut marks on the bone, suggesting that the child had endured something truly horrifying in that ancient cave. The research team also found a few fragments of human skull and teeth belonging to 2 other individuals in the same area. Upon further analysis, they determined that this child was an early Homo sapiens. Perhaps the most haunting detail was the evidence that the child's tongue appeared to have been cut out after death, using a sharp tool. This forced experts to ask a painful question. Why did people in ancient times do this? At that point in history, there was no sign of food scarcity, so it is difficult to explain the act as survival cannibalism. The macabre comb. Would you want to comb your hair with a comb made from a real human skull? If you had lived during the Iron Age in Britain, that might not have seemed so unusual. According to one discovery, scientists from the Museum of London Archaeology found a chilling object during the construction of a highway in England. It was a small item, about 5 centimeters long, but just a quick glance was enough for archaeologists to realize there was something extraordinary about it. This comb was skillfully crafted from a fragment of human skull. The highway, which was being built between Cambridge and Huntingdon, was suddenly interrupted by a discovery at the Bar Hill site. This area was once bustling some 2,500 years ago. Archaeologists collected more than 200 to 80,000 artifacts here, trying to recover as many items as possible before construction resumed. Among these thousands of objects, the Bar Hill comb stood out as one of the most intriguing finds. It has about a dozen teeth, but scientists are not even sure whether it was actually used to comb hair. At one end of the comb is a small hole, suggesting that it may once have been worn as a pendant. Why would someone wear a piece of human skull around their neck? Prehistory expert Michael Marshall believes it may have been a symbol of power. By wearing this comb, a person might have felt connected to the spirit or strength of the deceased. Of course, it might also have been a trophy from a tribe of cannibals. The pyramid is a secret octagon. This last surviving ancient wonder is famous as a square-based monument with 4 gigantic triangular faces. However, the truth is not that simple. Recent research suggests that the original pyramid actually has 8 faces, meaning it is in fact an octagonal pyramid. In reality, archaeologists have known about this at least since the 1940s, yet it seems they kept that secret for a long time. As far back as 85 years ago, British Egyptologist Blinders Petrie studied ancient Egyptian records and discovered a strange depiction of the Great Pyramid. That illustration showed the pyramid from above, and clearly, on each of the 4 main faces, there appeared to be a dividing line running down the center. When viewed from just the right angle, the pyramid reveals 8 faces, just like an octagon. But today, the naked eye can hardly detect this feature, as the structure has been worn down over time. In 1975, pyramid researcher I. Edwards recorded that the stones on the outer faces of the pyramid were built at a slight inward angle, toward the center of each face. This design created a subtle groove running down the middle of each face, splitting each large face into 2 smaller ones, for a total of 8 distinct sides. Compared to other pyramids, only the Great Pyramid built by Pharaoh Khufu 4,500 years ago possesses this almost invisible secret. Researcher Akio Kato has recently agreed with the observations of both Petrie and Edwards. He affirmed that the concavity of the pyramid's faces is so subtle that it cannot be seen from the ground and is only visible from above. However, the real reason behind this design remains a mystery. Shark attack victim. Recently, researchers from Oxford University announced a startling discovery regarding the oldest shark attack victim ever recorded in human history. What makes this case especially remarkable is that the man was not attacked while surfing in Australia or Florida. Instead, he was found to have died nearly 3,000 years ago while swimming off the coast of Japan. This discovery emerged from the meticulous work of an international team of scientists. They examined prehistoric human skeletons stored at Kyoto University, remains that had been excavated from various ancient sites over the past century. Among these, the researchers happened to find a man whose bones bore numerous distinct injuries. Immediately, they recognized that he was the victim of a shark attack. According to the research team, the skeleton had around 790 bite marks, with edges as sharp as saw teeth. The victim had been savagely attacked by a shark before being buried at the Sukamo Shell Mound Cemetery, just like the other members of his tribe. Using modern analysis methods, scientists determined that he died around 1370 BC, and that he was still alive when the attack took place. Most notably, his left hand had been completely bitten off, most likely as he tried to fend off the animal. In addition, both of his legs were missing. However, scientists are still not certain whether he was attacked while hunting sharks or simply fell victim while swimming near the shore. Whatever the truth may be, the death of this man stands as vivid evidence of the dangers that ancient people once faced in the deep ocean. The origin of dragons. Throughout human history, stories of enormous, fearsome dragons, creatures that could breathe fire and guard treasures in their lairs, have always haunted our imagination. Those who dismiss dragons as pure fiction may forget that dinosaurs once truly dominated this planet millions of years ago. And even today, there are bizarre creatures just as strange, like the octopus, with its 8 legs, 3 hearts, and 9 brains. What's fascinating is that as far back as the Middle Ages, many famous explorers claim to have seen creatures that we now call dragons. One of the most well-known stories belongs to Marco Polo. During his journey to the Far East, he recounted his encounters with enormous snake-like beasts resembling dragons in the province of Kajin, China. Marco Polo described these creatures as being 10 paces long, with massive bodies and 3 claws on each foot. Their eyes glowed in the darkness. Their jaws were wide enough to swallow a person whole, and they were nocturnal, hiding in caves and lying in wait for any creature that came near. But Marco Polo's stories didn't stop there. He also wrote that at that time, the Chinese regarded dragons as a genuine threat. They set traps, hunted, and killed dragons to harvest their parts for traditional medicine, and even for luxurious dishes reserved for the nobility. Some liquids extracted from dragons were mixed into precious wines, adding an air of mystery and power to lavish feasts. Some historians believe he might have encountered giant crocodiles, exaggerating their size and ferocity. Others suggest that, in folk legends, dragons are a blend of real animals, human imagination, and the cultural influences of each land. It is worth noting that Marco Polo was not the only one to describe dragons as real creatures. In the epic poem Beowulf, warriors faced fire-breathing dragons more than once. Throughout the Middle Ages, images of dragons appeared everywhere, in bestiaries and ancient manuscripts. Back then, many scholars believed dragons truly existed, often describing them as having large horse-like heads, thick legs, and incredibly powerful claws. Some modern researchers have even hypothesized that dinosaurs like Stegosaurus could have survived extinction, being mistaken for dragons by people in the Middle Ages. The records of Greek historian Strabo are also particularly noteworthy. More than 2,000 years ago, when he visited India, Strabo described giant reptiles with bat-like wings soaring across the night sky. These creatures were said to be able to spit a strange liquid, and if anyone came into contact with it, their skin would be bleached as if burned by acid, which only made the Chinese of that era more determined to hunt them down. Even though modern science has never confirmed the existence of dragons, as described in legend, stories of these mysterious creatures still live on vividly in the human mind. The sacred relic. Archaeologists have uncovered a relic that could change history and shed light on centuries of mystery in Austria. In 2016, a team of researchers excavated a Christian treasure that was 1,500 years old. This was not a random discovery. For many years, archaeologist Gerald Grabier had a hunch that something special was hidden atop a hill in Ayan. He and his team spent years digging, and just when they were about to give up, they were suddenly rewarded with an incredible stroke of luck. This hill was once the site of an ancient settlement established in the late 3rd century during the time of the Roman Empire. Beneath the remains, under the altar of an old church, they discovered a secret marble shrine. Inside this shrine were fragments of an intricately carved ivory box, decorated with Christian imagery. Gerald announced in a press release that there are only about 40 such ivory boxes in the world, and none like it had been found in over 100 years. These special boxes are known as pyxes. But what makes this discovery even more remarkable is their immense value, so much so that whenever a church was abandoned, the boxes were usually taken away. The fact that this box remained hidden in the ruins for more than a millennium is truly miraculous. The mystery deepens even further with the artwork on the box, which depicts the ascension of Christ but with a unique twist. Instead of the traditional image of Jesus rising into heaven, the scene shows him riding a chariot drawn by horses, heading toward a giant hand reaching down from the clouds. This is an image never before seen in early Christian art, as Christ had never been depicted ascending to heaven in a chariot like this. If finding a never-before-seen Christian image wasn't enough, there is another possibility. This ancient box may once have been used to contain fragments of the true cross itself. When scientists analyzed the relic, they found metal hinges and several tiny pieces of wood. These pieces of wood did not appear to be part of the original box and may well have been the sacred relic protected inside the ivory. The investigation is still ongoing, but if true, this could be the most significant Christian discovery in centuries. The Nubian egg. Among the most mysterious artifacts ever discovered in Africa, there is one small object that holds countless questions about human history. This is the Nubian egg, a real ostrich egg that has been buried underground for more than 6,500 years. Many researchers believe this egg could change the way we view the past. Some even suggest it is evidence that the ancient Egyptians knew about distant lands across the ocean long before the era of Columbus. The story begins in 1907, when a British archaeologist named Malib Sil conducted an excavation at an ancient cemetery in northern Sudan. As he was surveying more than 100 tombs belonging to the Nada or Badarian civilization, he came across this ostrich egg. What makes this egg remarkable is not only its impressive age, but also what is engraved on its surface. The ostrich that laid this egg did so before Stonehenge even existed, and yet it has survived almost intact to the present day. The most intriguing feature is the intricate patterns carefully carved into the eggshell. On one side of the egg appear 3 sharp triangles, strikingly similar to the shape of the Giza pyramids today. Beside them is a winding line, which many believe is a symbol for the legendary Nile River. When viewed as a whole, these drawings look like a primitive map, with the pyramids representing ancient Egypt. However, a major question arises. According to the official record, the Egyptian pyramids only appeared about 4,600 years ago, which means these engravings predate the actual pyramids by 2,000 years. How could anyone have carved images of pyramids onto an egg when the pyramids themselves did not yet exist? Several theories have been proposed to explain this contradiction. Some believe the triangles are simply depictions of mountains, but Sudan is not known for its tall, snow-capped peaks, so this idea was quickly dismissed. Others suggest the pyramids may actually be far older than we currently believe, even though all archaeological evidence points to the pyramids being the work of the Egyptian pharaohs. The mystery deepened when concentric circles were discovered clearly carved at the top of the egg. These rings reminded many researchers of the famous description by the Greek philosopher Plato of the legendary city of Atlantis in his work Critias. Plato once described Atlantis as a city built with alternating rings of land and sea, 2 rings of land and 3 rings of water, all equidistant from the center. Though the circles on the egg are rather rudimentary, they coincide in a striking way with Plato's account of Atlantis. It is possible that someone in ancient times tried to depict the legendary city on the eggshell, without knowing that thousands of years later, future generations would uncover it and ask profound questions about its meaning. From this, a theory has emerged that the creator of the Nubian egg not only knew of the pyramids, but also had knowledge of Atlantis. The arrangement of the drawing suggests Atlantis was located somewhere north of Egypt, near the region of Spain. If this is true, then the history of ancient Egypt, and even of humanity itself, may still hold many secrets yet to be revealed. 2 new stone hangers. New discoveries continue to emerge at such a rapid pace that even archaeologists are struggling to keep up. 2 new stone circles have just been found in England, changing our understanding of the prehistoric landscape. These 2 entirely new circles from the Stone Age have caused an incredible stir among archaeologists. Each of these circles is at least 5,000 years old, and both are enormous, so large in fact that they can easily be compared to Stonehenge itself. What's fascinating is that these new structures were not discovered by professional archaeologists. Instead, it was an independent researcher named Alan Endicott who happened to find them. Calling it a coincidence isn't quite accurate, because Alan had been actively searching for ancient relics. For decades, he had been tirelessly surveying the areas of Dore and Devon, seeking evidence of activity from the Neolithic era. Alan Endicott's efforts finally paid off, as scientific methods have now confirmed a discovery that could change history. Just a few weeks ago, a team of volunteer excavators visited one of Alan's sites and began digging for clues. According to Alan, one of the stone circles he uncovered is similar in both size and construction methods to Stonehenge itself. This is the kind of evidence archaeologists have long been waiting for to confirm that 5,000 years ago, Britain was home to more than just a single grand stone circle. There were many such circles, spread across the British Isles. The civilization that built Stonehenge was actually engaged in a stone circle building frenzy across this entire land. Alan believes that all three stone circles may have been built by the same group of people. These master builders may have belonged to a guild of stoneworkers responsible for constructing large monuments all over England. After the excavation, Alan named one of the circles Methol. This circle now has about 20 standing stones, though it may once have had even more. The other circle was named Irishman's Wall, and only 6 standing stones remain there today. Poveglia, hidden among the still waters of the Venetian lagoon in northern Italy, less than half a mile from Venice, Poveglia is a small island that has witnessed countless ups and downs in European history. The name of this island first appeared in ancient records in the 5th century, at a time when it was still home to a small community. However, by 1379, that peaceful existence was shattered when war broke out, forcing all the inhabitants to abandon their homeland and leaving the island submerged in solitude. In 1776, Poveglia became a quarantine station for those suffering from the plague and other contagious diseases. Patients were brought here in hopes of containing the epidemic, but in reality, the island became the final resting place for countless unfortunate souls. By 1922, the authorities had once again transformed Poveglia, this time into a psychiatric hospital, a place surrounded by cold walls and stories that have never been fully explained. In 1968, the hospital closed its doors, leaving Poveglia abandoned and forgotten amid the mists of the lagoon. Although there were once plans to turn this place into a luxury resort, all such efforts failed. Today, Poveglia still stands, desolate and empty, sending a chill down the spine of anyone who mentions its name. One of the most chilling facts about Poveglia is that nearly half of the island is now a burial ground for tens of thousands of bodies brought here over the centuries. Archaeological excavations on neighboring islands have uncovered mass graves filled with plague victims, but most of Poveglia's mysteries still lie hidden beneath untouched earth. Not only that, Poveglia is also shrouded in terrifying rumors. According to legend, a doctor at the island's psychiatric hospital once tortured and even murdered his patients in gruesome ways, dismembering their bodies. Although no one has ever verified these tales, the ruins of the old hospital still stand amidst the overgrown grass, serving as a haunting reminder of the island's dark and troubled past. The genius of the Vikings. When most people think of the Vikings, they immediately picture fierce warriors raiding coastal villages across Europe. However, the true story of the Vikings is much more complex and fascinating than these common stereotypes. Beneath their fearsome appearance, they were actually bold explorers, and above all, builders of a civilization whose achievements far surpassed their era. The Vikings did not merely sail the seas in their legendary ships. They expanded their trade networks across Europe and even reached distant eastern shores. They established bustling marketplaces, founded new cities, and gradually built a unique social system deeply rooted in the Nordic spirit. As the Vikings expanded their influence, they created a remarkable culture and left a lasting mark on the map of world history. Traditional history still holds that the first telescope appeared at the end of the 16th century, thanks to Dutch lensmakers. But a sensational discovery in the year 2000 changed everything. When archaeologists excavated a Viking site on the island of Gotland, they uncovered a sophisticated lens, now known as the Visby lens. What stunned scientists was that this lens had been crafted 6 centuries before the Dutch invented the telescope. At first glance, the Visby lens appears quite simple, but in reality, it is a masterpiece of technology. Researchers have determined that this is clear evidence the Vikings were able to manufacture lenses at an exceptionally high level, a time when most other civilizations had yet to fully grasp the phenomenon of light refraction. The technique for making elliptical lenses appeared during the Viking era and then vanished for hundreds of years. Dr. Olaf Schmidt shared that the history of technology might be far more complicated than we once believed. He affirmed that this elliptical lens was invented hundreds of years earlier than traditional records suggest. Schmidt believes that the knowledge of lens making had once flourished, only to disappear into the currents of history, forcing later generations to rediscover it again in the 16th century. The story does not end there. Archaeologists have now uncovered a total of 10 lenses on Gotland. What's intriguing is that, although these artifacts are clearly linked to the Vikings, there is still debate over whether they were actually made by Viking hands. Some traces suggest that the true origin of the lenses may lie in the Byzantine Empire. If these theories are correct, then the Vikings were not just mighty warriors, but technological intermediaries between East and West. They may have brought the lenses from Byzantium back to the northern lands during their trading ventures, helping to preserve technological knowledge that once existed in ancient Rome. It's possible that the history of telescopes and lens-making stretches much farther back than our books record, and that the Vikings once held this secret in their hands long before the Western world rediscovered the power of those small pieces of glass. The mysteries of the Kalamba stone jars. Hidden among the deep green mountains of Lorlindu National Park, the Bada Valley is home to one of Asia's most intriguing archaeological enigmas. Here, amid the majestic landscape, hundreds of giant stone jars known as Kalamba are scattered across the hillsides and valleys, creating a scene that is both unfamiliar and mysterious. Although scientists have studied these stone jars for decades, they continue to fascinate both researchers and local people alike. The first puzzle lies in the very age of these jars. No one is certain when they first appeared. Some theories suggest they are only about 1,000 years old, while other archaeologists boldly claim they may date back to a time before Asia's ancient civilizations had even taken shape. Strangely, not a single local legend speaks of their origin or original purpose. It is as if these giant jars are a legacy that fell from an entirely unknown civilization, their history erased by time. The next challenge comes from the material used to make the jars. Geological analysis reveals that the type of stone used for the Kalamba does not originate in the Bada Valley. Transporting hundreds of such stones through rugged mountains and dense forests would require skills and resources seemingly beyond the reach of any ancient community in the region. The name Kalamba means the king's bathtub, a title that sounds both intriguing and mysterious. It's hard to imagine any king choosing to bathe in such a remote place, and even harder to believe that hundreds of these bathtubs would be needed. In particular, many of the jars were once covered by massive stone lids, so heavy that lifting them would be a challenge in itself. This makes the bathtub theory even harder to accept. Many modern researchers believe the stone jars may have been used for burial purposes. However, even this theory does not explain all of the mysteries. Some jars, like those found in Padang Tempura, are not deep enough to hold a human body. This raises the question, what were they made for? And who decided to build hundreds of such massive structures in this wild and remote land? The intrigue deepens when examining the interiors of some Kalamba. Certain jars are divided into 2 separate chambers by a small stone ridge, differing in height by only a few centimeters. The mystery continues. Some of the large stone lids are decorated with strange figures, most of which do not resemble any living creatures today. Occasionally, human shapes or faces are found carved in relief on the jars, all with an abstract, unexplainable quality. Perhaps the strangest feature is found on jars, with perfectly parallel lines running around their bodies. Some have speculated that ancient people once possessed a technology that could soften stone, allowing them to shape large blocks as if molding clay. This controversial theory has never been fully dismissed. Other researchers propose that these cylindrical jars were used in mineral processing, especially for gold extraction. In fact, unusual burn marks have been found on some of the giant jars, as if metal had once flowed out from inside. As time goes by and many secrets remain buried beneath layers of moss and age, the Calamba of Bada Valley still stand tall among the ancient forests, waiting for the day when their true purpose and origin might finally be uncovered. The forgotten ruins of Oaxaca. When people think of the Maya civilization, most imagine it as one of the oldest cultures in the Americas. But in reality, the history of the Maya stretches much farther back than we commonly realize. Today, researchers have confirmed that the origins of the Maya may go back nearly 8,000 years. This is no secret within the field of archaeology, for hidden within the hazy pages of Central America's history is a little-known era called the Time of the First People. This period is thought to have begun around 6000 BCE, when the first groups of people laid the foundation for what would later become the Maya civilization. Scientists believe that the classical Maya were, in fact, simply inheritors of the knowledge and achievements of earlier cultures. However, there is a profound question that is not easily answered. When does one culture truly end to make way for another? When did the first people become the Maya? If traditions, languages, and knowledge are passed down through countless generations, then the line between two cultures may be little more than a new name given to an old current. This is both a philosophical issue and one that demands deep scientific analysis, and to this day, there is no truly satisfactory answer. Even so, researchers continue to search for the earliest traces of the Maya. Some evidence suggests their roots may extend all the way back to the so-called Fourth Era, revealed through the mysterious ruins of a forgotten city called Oskin. This city lies in the Yucatan region, about 60 kilometers south of the capital, Mérida. Oskin was first discovered in 1839 by the famous travel writer John Stevens. However, since then, only a handful of studies have been carried out, and the site has received very little attention from the scientific community. The ruins of Oskin have suffered heavy damage from some catastrophe that no one has yet been able to identify. Some theories suggest that massive tsunamis around 9500 BCE submerged the entire area underwater. Not just Oskin, but many other cities in the Yucatan show signs of destruction by enormous floods that lasted for extended periods. This also raises questions about the accuracy of dating methods applied to Maya sites today. Oskin's allure is not just its history of destruction by nature. It has also drawn the attention of explorers because of its extremely unusual artifacts. Early explorers discovered a small temple with bizarrely carved human columns. Although most of these statues were destroyed in the 19th century, fortunately, some documentary photos have survived to this day. Looking at these, one cannot help but be surprised. These figures seem not to belong to traditional Maya art. Some have squared-off heads and eyes so large as to be almost unnatural. There are statues that resemble robots, figures more familiar to us today than anything seen in classic Maya imagery. A few of these remarkable statues have been preserved by archaeologists and are currently displayed at the Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City. While all of them wear traditional Mesoamerican attire, it is clear that their features do not match those of the Maya. Most notable is a statue wearing a necklace adorned with an upside-down hand motif. This is the most controversial detail. According to legends of Atlantis and the famous prophet Edgar Cayce, this was the symbol of a group known as the Children of the Law of One, who once lived in the legendary city of Atlantis. Cayce believed that before Atlantis was swallowed by the sea, the city was divided by two major political factions, and the symbol of the Children of the Law of One was the inverted hand. These details, as unbelievable as they may sound, have convinced some that the artisans who sculpted these strange statues at Oskin may have been descendants, or perhaps even survivors, of Atlantis' catastrophic downfall. Skeletons at the beach. Not long ago, a chilling discovery was made on a coastal beach in Wales. It all began in 2014, when a series of violent storms battered the area. After each storm, local residents started noticing white bones protruding from the sand. At first, everyone thought it was nothing unusual, but as the days passed, the situation became increasingly clear. people realized that hundreds of skeletons had been lying just beneath the thin layer of sand on the very beach where they had strolled with their children, unaware they were walking on what was truly a graveyard. Once it was confirmed that this beach was in fact a burial ground, archaeologists were quickly called in to address the situation. They discovered not just a few dozen, but hundreds of human remains, all dating back to the medieval period. Excavations began in 2014 and continued steadily until 2021. Based on their findings, archaeologists are now convinced that a Christian community once lived right by the shoreline, burying their loved ones behind the village's churchyard. Ironically, what was once an ancient cemetery is now a popular family beach. To date, archaeologists have uncovered a total of 210 graves. However, one strange detail is that very few grave goods were found. Only a handful of amber fragments, a few small pins, and nothing truly remarkable. Another puzzling aspect for researchers is the unusually high number of women and children among the remains. Together, they account for more than half of all the skeletons discovered. To this day, archaeologists have yet to explain the reason for this abnormally high mortality rate among women and children, nor do they know what happened to the village by the sea. The magic sphere of Athens. At the foot of the Acropolis, right in the heart of ancient Athens, archaeologists have uncovered a mysterious artifact that has left many people amazed. It is a large stone sphere, lying motionless for thousands of years, as if holding within it a secret of the ancient Greek civilization. At first glance, the sphere looks like an enormous cannonball, its surface adorned with mysterious carvings, most notably a figure wearing a radiant crown, with beams shining out like the rays of the sun. This scene immediately brings to mind the famous Statue of Liberty in America. But in fact, this stone sphere is about 1,800 years old. At first, researchers thought it was simply another historical enigma, just one more artifact lying within the city of Athens. But on closer inspection, they realized that the figure carved on the sphere was not the Statue of Liberty, but rather the god Helios. This led to a fascinating discovery. The image of the Statue of Liberty, admired by millions of Americans, was in fact inspired by ancient pagan deities. Although the American Statue of Liberty was modeled after the Roman goddess Libertas, while Helios was the sun god of the Greeks, both share strikingly similar symbolic and historical meanings. The ideas of freedom, light, strength, and hope represented by Helios, Libertas, the Statue of Liberty, and even the enigmatic stone sphere in Athens all originate from the dawn of human civilization. The first person to discover this sphere was Professor Athanasios Ropos, who found it during an excavation near the ruins of the Dionysus Theatre more than 150 years ago. On the surface of the sphere is an image of Helios crowned with radiant spikes. In one hand, Helios holds a whip. In the other, he tightly grips a scepter topped with 3 torches. At his feet are 2 creatures, perhaps dogs, lions, or possibly mythical beasts that no one can definitively identify. Beside them is a bizarre snake with a human head, believed to represent a constellation in the night sky. But the mysteries don't end there. The sphere is also covered in a series of other strange symbols. A large circle surrounding smaller circles, several lines of ancient Greek text whose meaning remains unclear, and characters arranged in ways that do not form any known Greek word. This only adds to the sphere's allure and mystery, as experts still cannot fully decipher what the ancients intended to convey. Based on research findings, scientists believe the sphere was crafted around the 2nd century AD. To this day, its true purpose and the meaning of its symbols remain unsolved. Some scholars think the sphere was connected to rituals worshipping the sun god and served as a magical object used in religious ceremonies. Belgian scholar Armand Zat, who studied the sphere in 1913, believed it was a sacred item representing the power of Helios. Others have suggested that the sphere was a talisman given to ancient gladiators to help them triumph in life and death battles in the arena. The horrors of Mona Island. In the heart of the Caribbean Sea, hidden between Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, lies an island that few have ever heard of. This is Mona Island, a place shrouded in secrets, stained by the blood of history, and cloaked in shadows that have never been revealed. Mona is not a destination for bustling tourist crowds or beach lovers. Instead, it is a true labyrinth, riddled with hundreds of underground tunnels where the darkness is so deep that sunlight from the surface can never reach. A particularly notorious section of Mona is known as the Dark Zone. It is a place utterly untouched by any ray of light from the world above, a natural dungeon forgotten for millennia. And it was here that researchers discovered ancient inscriptions carved into the raw stone walls, haunting words that read, "God created many things." Closer to the surface, you will find traces of many different civilizations. Archaeologists once uncovered an Incan jar filled with pure gold. That was not all. They also found an ancient Spanish wine vessel, considered the oldest wine ever discovered on the American continent. Today, Mona belongs to Puerto Rico and is officially part of US territory. Even so, very few people ever set foot on the island. Its rugged landscape, harsh natural conditions, and remote location mean that modern tourists rarely visit. Archaeologist Ido Davila once described Mona as a floating fortress in the ocean, both solitary and enigmatic in its appearance. Yet, the past of Mona is filled with dark chapters that few dare to mention. Long before Europeans first set foot in the New World, Mona was home to indigenous peoples. It is believed that the island has been inhabited since about 3000 BCE. By the time Christopher Columbus landed on Mona in 1494, it was already the center of a flourishing ancient culture. But from that moment onward, Mona witnessed a series of horrific events. It became a stopping point for missionaries, wandering pirates, soldiers of colonial powers, and, in more recent times, scientists and refugees. Looking back into antiquity, archaeologists have found stone tools in Mona's caves dating back 5,000 years. By the 12th century, an indigenous group known as the Taino settled on the island, and their descendants still live throughout the Caribbean today. The darkest period in Mona's history began in the early 16th century, when the island was swept up in the storm of Spanish colonialism. By 1515, Mona had become a transfer station for the crews of slave ships. Even more horrifying, King Ferdinand II forced the Taino to make a cruel choice: either become fishermen and farmers serving the Spanish, or descend into the pitch-black mines to extract bat guano for use in gunpowder and fertilizer production. Many indigenous people chose to fish or farm, but the Spanish still needed labor for the mines and brought in slaves from other islands to carry out this grueling, dangerous work. The tragedy of Mona continued for centuries. By the time Puerto Rico was handed over to the United States in 1898, the island's population had dwindled to just 6 surviving people. This haunting number remains as a chilling reminder of all that history has taken from this small, lonely, and shadowy island. Pirate terrors in the Mediterranean. Sometimes, the mysteries of the past only come to light when a chance discovery leaves the modern world stunned. On the floor of the Mediterranean Sea, just off the coast of Spain, underwater archaeologists have uncovered the wreck of a strange ghost ship. This was no ordinary wreck. It was the remains of a pirate vessel that once struck terror across these waters more than 3 centuries ago. This sunken ship dates back to the 17th century and was heavily armed, ready for pursuit and slaughter. But what truly astonished maritime archaeologists was the cunning of the pirates who sailed her. Instead of flaunting their might like a typical warship, they disguised their vessel as a harmless merchant ship. In the hold, researchers found piles of pots, pans, and cheap goods from Algiers. These wares were loaded aboard, specifically to deceive anyone who might inspect the ship, making it appear as though it was simply transporting ordinary cargo to Spain. Perhaps fate did not favor these outlaws. Before they could carry out their plan, the ship was sent to the bottom of the sea. Its wreck was only recently discovered thanks to Odyssey Marine Exploration, a Florida-based ocean exploration company. At the time, the team was searching for the wreck of the British warship HMS Sussex, which sank in 1694. Along the way, they not only found remnants of Roman ships, but also uncovered the pirate ship with its extraordinary story. Experts have determined that this vessel once belonged to the notorious group known as the Barbary Pirates. These pirates were primarily Muslims who dominated the Mediterranean for over 200 years. Their greatest stronghold was in Algiers, turning the city into a center of power and fear. At their peak, Algiers was a city of some 60,000 pirates, fugitives, and cold-blooded killers. The Barbary pirates set sail long before the golden age of Caribbean piracy. They lived by the sword and by brutality, regularly raiding coastal villages along the Mediterranean and the Atlantic shores of Africa. Their most common tactic was to kidnap locals, demanding ransom from their families or selling them into the thriving slave markets of North Africa. Their fleet was not large. The discovered ship measured only about 45 feet long and was rigged with 2 lateen sails. Its small size and nimble design allowed it to slip in and out of harbors, and it could even be rowed when needed, making it possible for the pirates to approach targets without being detected. Today, the wreck remains deep beneath the waves, a cold grave for an era of blood and tears, a place where history has sunk, along with its unanswered mysteries. Looking back, one can truly grasp the scale and terror that the Barbary pirates spread across the Mediterranean and far beyond for centuries. The Statue of Liberty. The Statue of Liberty, America's brilliant symbol with its radiant, sunburst crown, has long been seen as the embodiment of liberty and hope. Yet, few people realize that the inspiration behind this monumental work remains a subject of debate among historians and mythologists. Some recent theories suggest that the Statue of Liberty may have drawn inspiration from the goddess Hecate in ancient Greek mythology. Hecate was not a goddess of peace or light like Libertas, but rather the deity of magic, witchcraft, and mysteries lurking in the shadows. If someone wished to bring the dead back to life, they would call upon Hecate's name. Her terrifying power was so great that, according to ancient accounts, even mighty Zeus himself was said to fear her. This goddess was said to dwell in dark caves beneath the earth, surrounded by bizarre creatures, monsters that fed on human blood. What is particularly noteworthy is that Hecate is often depicted holding 2 torches, lighting the way for lost souls in the darkness. This detail evokes images of Helios, who was also commonly shown wielding a scepter topped with 3 torches. Meanwhile, in the case of the Statue of Liberty, her torch has become a symbol of light guiding the way to freedom, hope, and equality. All these details blur the boundaries between mythological archetypes, especially considering that Libertas herself was never depicted holding a torch. In traditional imagery, Libertas usually appears with a spear and a special cap of liberty. This cap was once a symbol given to freed slaves in Roman times, and later became a familiar icon representing the aspiration for freedom. Libertas was worshipped since the days of the Roman Republic, with her own temple on the Aventine Hill. In Greek culture, there was even an equivalent goddess named Eleutheria. Crucially, Libertas did not wear a radiant sun crown like the Statue of Liberty. When you compare images of Libertas from ancient sculptures to the modern Statue of Liberty, the differences are striking. This becomes even more apparent when you look at the magic sphere once discovered in Athens, which depicts Helios with a crown of light, bearing many similarities to the famous statue in New York. These coincidences force us to ask, who ultimately inspired the Statue of Liberty? Perhaps even America's greatest icon still preserves a fragment of ancient mythological heritage, one that we are only just beginning to uncover. The world's oldest ritual. One of the most astonishing archaeological discoveries in recent years is the evidence of the world's oldest ritual. Professor Sheila Coulson from the University of Oslo uncovered proof that Homo sapiens performed rituals in Africa as far back as 70,000 years ago. This evidence was found while she was studying the San people, who live in the remote regions of Botswana. While investigating Stone Age artifacts in the hills of the Kalahari Desert, Professor Sheila happened upon a small cave that had been almost completely untouched by humans. Inside the cave, she saw a large rock carved in the shape of a python's head. According to her and her students, the stone looked remarkably like a real python, so much so that when light hit its surface, it almost seemed to shimmer like snakeskin. But that was not all. Professor Sheila and her research team decided to dig right in front of the stone snake's head. They quickly uncovered a number of artifacts that were later determined to be about 70,000 years old. Among these finds were spearheads, tools, and spear tips painted red, all bearing traces of having been burned. What is most remarkable is that this ritual took place earlier than any other ritual ever identified by science. This discovery not only changes the way we look at human history, but also opens up new questions about the spiritual life and beliefs of our earliest ancestors. The Horned Giants of Pennsylvania. Did giants truly once walk the earth? That is a question that has sparked the imagination of humanity for centuries. While most people consider giants to be nothing more than myth, many archaeological records contain strange evidence, suggesting the possibility that these giant beings may have actually existed. One of the most astonishing examples appeared in none other than the New York Times over a century ago. That article was nearly buried by the passage of time, and when it was found, it caused a great deal of surprise. The striking headline read, "Horned Human Skulls Found. Remarkable Discovery by Archaeologists in the Susa Valley." The article's chilling content recounted the discovery of the remains of 68 men, entirely different from any skeletons ever found before. These skeletons were excavated from a mound at Tuga Point under the supervision of Professor A.B. Skinner from the Museum of the American Indian. The skeletons measured from 2.1 meters to nearly 7 meters in height, significantly taller than any modern human. Not only that, these skeletons were buried alongside massive stone axes, weapons that could only have been used by the strong arms of true giants. But the most shocking detail was found in the skulls. Some of them had 2 protruding bones that researchers described as horns. A photograph of the excavation site, taken by George Dunn in 1916, shows the scene of unearthing these giant skeletons. When a reputable newspaper like the New York Times once published it as a true event, the doubts about the authenticity of the story became even more intriguing. In reality, stories about giants are not rare. Even in the Bible, beings such as Goliath and the Nephilim are mentioned many times as a part of the mythological history of mankind. In fact, some modern scholars have even theorized that legendary characters such as Gilgamesh of Mesopotamia or Hercules of Greece could have been inspired by giants who truly existed. The story of the Horned Giants in Pennsylvania is only one in a series of mysterious discoveries that were reported in North American newspapers throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries. As the wilderness gradually gave way to farms and new cities, more and more Americans happened to discover giant skeletons buried deep beneath the land of their ancestors. In 1822, a skeleton as tall as 8 feet was discovered in Towanda. In 1895, the World newspaper reported on a giant human skeleton 9 feet tall found in California. Of course, history also records cases of fraud, such as the famous Cardiff giant. But alongside those, there are still many mysterious cases that have never been satisfactorily explained and seem to have simply been forgotten by time. Did ancient aliens once walk among us? Hidden deep within the steep canyons and desolate caves of North America are ancient rock carvings left behind by native peoples. These engravings have always fascinated archaeologists and sparked countless theories. The journey to unravel these mysteries begins in the heart of Lincoln County, Nevada. Amidst the arid lands, researchers have discovered a treasure trove of petroglyphs, some of which have existed for up to 500 years. Quite a few of these carvings depict strange beings, with forms so unusual that they seem not to belong to this world. However, human history in southern Nevada stretches much further back than that. Small streams and patches of lush vegetation once drew ancient inhabitants here more than 11,000 years ago. According to local tribal legends, Lincoln County and Lake Panagot were once considered the Garden of Eden of the Americas. According to journalist Ken Lane, an expert in ancient American rock art, many of the carvings on the rock faces depict familiar animals that were once closely associated with the ancestors of today's Pudi and Shawnee people. However, there are also images that are completely beyond imagination, such as a giant monster rising from the water, or a creature with a large head that looks exactly like an alien from science fiction movies. At times, there are even images of strange astronomical phenomena that further baffle researchers. If Nevada were the only place with such carvings, perhaps the story would be easier to explain. But the truth is, these mysterious traces appear in many other places. Not far from the dazzling lights of Las Vegas, the region of Moab in Utah also hides its own collection of strange rock art, with some of the most remarkable found in Sego Canyon. Some of these works were created as far back as 6,000 years ago, while others are only a few hundred years old. What surprises researchers is that Despite being created in different eras, the ancient carvings in both Utah and Nevada share a mysterious, common feature: the forms of beings that look like aliens. One of the most famous carvings is a stone panel with 5 bizarre red figures that scientists have named andromorphs. These might be depictions of deities, or perhaps evidence of an unexplained encounter between ancient people and beings from another world. Vampires. Recently, investigators have used modern technology to shed light on one of the strangest mysteries in New England. This is the story of a vampire whose remains were found in Griswold, Connecticut. The story began about 30 years ago, when archaeologists discovered a skeleton with its arms crossed in an X shape over the chest. This method of burial was not random, but rather a ritual used by 19th century Americans when they believed someone possessed supernatural powers and might rise from the grave to suck the blood of villagers. The deceased was buried this way simply because someone in the community truly believed he might be a vampire. It was a fear rooted in the anxieties of society at the time. They believed that placing the arms over the chest of the dead would prevent him from coming back to life and bringing disaster upon the villagers. However, based on what modern science has uncovered, it is highly likely that this man was not a supernatural being at all. Instead, he suffered from tuberculosis. In that era, many people genuinely believed tuberculosis was the result of being attacked by a vampire. Those who fell ill not only suffered physically, but were also shunned by their community, even treated as if they were real-life monsters. The remains of the vampire at Griswold became known as John Barber, based on the inscription JB55 carved on the headstone. Scientists at Paranormal Nanolabs conducted DNA analysis on these remains. Based on historical records, it was discovered that there had indeed been a man named John Barber living in this community at exactly the time he died. From there, researchers took a step further through time. Using machine learning models and 3D reconstruction techniques, they recreated the face of John Barber. The result revealed that the man once considered a vampire had fair skin, brown hair, brown eyes, and many freckles. But when looking at the 3D reconstruction, many people couldn't help but laugh, as he looked remarkably like a villain from the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. The story of John Barber is evidence of how fear and ignorance once led people to assign terrible labels to each other, sometimes simply because of a deadly disease no one understood. Behind the vampire legend of New England lies a tragedy of isolation and mistaken beliefs, and it was not until the 21st century that modern technology could finally restore the truth for a man once feared and forgotten by society. Ancient footprints. Along the northwest coast of England, within layers of ancient mud, one can find remnants of a world long lost. Here, hundreds of fossilized traces of prehistoric animals have been discovered. But what is even more surprising is that, alongside them, there are human footprints, showing that thousands of years ago, people once walked on this very land. The oldest footprint found here dates back about 9,000 years, while the most recent ones are from the Middle Ages, just about a millennium ago. The ancient world comes to life through each impression left in the mud, giving us the feeling of witnessing the silent steps of our ancestors from a distant past. Recently, Dr. Alison Burns made a truly remarkable discovery. She found a footprint preserved almost perfectly, belonging to a young man who crossed the beach around 8,200 years ago. What impressed her was that the little toe of this ancient person bore the mark of a small callus. In those days, people rarely wore shoes. They moved mostly with bare feet, so each time they sat down, the little toe would frequently rub against the ground, forming small calluses. Even a faint footprint is enough to tell the story of an entire way of life, the habits, and the living conditions of people from long ago. The entire area was once a vast tidal mudflat. Thanks to this, the footprints have been preserved until today. When ancient people walked across the wet mud, every step left a depression. Then, the scorching sun would dry the mud, forming solid molds of the footprints. Over millennia, new layers of mud continue to cover them, burying and protecting these precious traces from the ravages of time. It is hard not to feel a sense of wonder when standing on a modern beach, looking down at the footprints set in stone and imagining the scene thousands of years ago. England then was not the bustling cities or lively beaches we know today. but a pristine marshland where giant animals and the earliest humans coexisted, leaving their marks for future generations to discover amid the hustle and bustle of our world today. The Garden of the Hesperides in Greek mythology. When it comes to the legendary lands of ancient Greece, the Garden of the Hesperides cannot be left out. In the imagination of the ancients, this garden was said to lie at the very western edge of the world, where the boundary between light and darkness met, and where myth and reality blended into a scene that was both poetic and mysterious. According to legend, the three Hesperides sisters were daughters of the Titan Atlas and the goddess Nyx. These three nymphs were entrusted with the task of guarding the sacred garden, a place that only those granted permission by the gods could enter. At the heart of the garden grew golden apple trees, their branches shining brightly like the evening sun. It was here that Zeus held his wedding to the goddess Hera, marking one of the most important events in Greek mythology. The golden apples of the Hesperides were not only symbols of immortality and power, but also the reason why heroes had to overcome countless challenges to pick them. For centuries, scholars and archaeologists have searched for traces of the Garden of the Hesperides in the real world. Questions about the garden's origins have led them to many regions across the Mediterranean. Increasingly, evidence suggests that the mythical Hesperides might actually be located in the southwest of Europe. In ancient times, the Greeks did not know of the orange, and when they first set foot in these fertile lands, they were amazed by the golden fruits growing in clusters, shining with a sweet fragrance like treasures of nature. They called these golden apples, and the myth gradually became a romantic explanation for the wonders of the new world they discovered. Historians believe that the image of a garden far to the west also fits the descriptions given by ancient Greek writers, who always considered the far western Mediterranean to be the end of the world. From a modern perspective, the Garden of the Hesperides may not be a magical land existing only in dreams, but rather a symbol of human wonder and fascination at the unfamiliar beauty of untouched nature. Whether real or just a product of imagination, the Garden of the Hesperides has always held a special place in humanity's memory. It is not only a gathering place for the gods, but also a beautiful symbol of the meeting between humankind and the natural world, between reality and eternal dreams. And even today, when someone finds themselves standing in a grove of brilliant golden oranges in Portugal, they might quietly wonder if they are, in fact, standing in the modern-day Garden of the Hesperides. The rare golden sword pommel. A mysterious sword pommel, or sword hilt, made entirely of solid gold, was recently discovered by a metal detectorist near the United Kingdom. This artifact is considered an extremely rare find, with an estimated value of more than $30,000. A senior curator from the Medieval Archaeology and History Unit of the National Museum of Scotland stated that nothing like this has ever been found in the United Kingdom before. The sword pommel is exquisitely crafted and decorated with incredible detail. Yet, no one knows to whom it once belonged, where it came from, or whether it might be evidence of an ancient battle that has never been recorded. Upon closer examination, archaeologists realized that the artifact was designed in the shape of a bird. It appears to be a blend of Anglo-Saxon artistry and Christian symbolism. This sword pommel is also adorned with images of mythical creatures and scenes of crucifixion. It is filled with intricate and finely carved patterns, which only add to the mystery of this object. It is difficult to imagine what the complete sword would have looked like. We do not know exactly when this sword hilt was made. If you find these mysterious stories fascinating, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of our upcoming discoveries. We look forward to seeing you in the next video.